This week, millions of utility customers' passwords stored in plain text. Google ditches passwords in the latest update for Android devices. Online validation services are vulnerable to digital signature spoofing attacks. Flaws in 4G and 5G can allow snooping on calls. And TurboTax is hit with a credential stuffing attack where tax returns were compromised. Nicholas Shiberis from Acunetics joins us for expert commentary on how hackers created social media work after a bug was ignored. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer's sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live.
Welcome to Hack Naked News, episode 209 for February 26, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Quick announcement before we get started. Ocean is hosting the Rhode Island Cybersecurity Exchange Day on March 13th at O'Hare Academic Building in Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. You can register at ocean.org/events. That's OSHEAN.org/events. Secure World Boston is hosting their 15th annual conference March 27th through the 28th at the Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners get $100 off the conference pass by visiting Secure World Expo and using the discount code SecurityWeekly. And now, the news for this week. Plain wrong, millions of utility customers' passwords were stored in plain text. Startled, the researcher, he fed the online form from the utility account number and the last four digits of a phone number it was asking for, and a few minutes later, the account password in plain text was sent to his inbox. This was frustrating, and of course it's insecure, and it shouldn't be happening in 2018, but this turned out to be the real story here, is it turned out to be a flaw common to websites designed by this Atlanta firm called SEDC. We'll call it SEDC. After finding SEDC's copyright notices in the footer of the local utility's website, the researcher began looking for more customer-facing sites designed by SEDC. He found that the confirmed SED's footer and the same offer to plain text passwords in more than 80 company utility websites. Now, those companies service 15 million or so clients across the U.S., maybe the world. It didn't state, but the real number could easily be a lot more, as SEDC claims that they serve 250 utility companies' websites and software. Google's ditching passwords in the latest update to Android. Support for FIDOs, of course, the FIDO and FIDO2 standard gives Android the user's ability to utilize their device's built-in fingerprint sensors, or if the device doesn't have them, log into apps and browsers using other means like a PIN or swipe pattern, which a lot of this I thought was functionality, but maybe not fully compatible with FIDO, which is the announcement here. So while remembering your passwords is, of course, tiring and cumbersome for some users, Google's opting out of the passwords for Android devices has security implications as well, of course, with an array of emerging attacks relying on stolen credentials, of course, including phishing, man-in-the-middle, and other such attacks. Many apps and browsers are jumping on board when it comes to the notion of passwordless logins and using things like biometrics. Of course, I should caution our listeners, of course, biometrics are not the panacea of all things security. Typically, your fingerprint is stored on a hash on your phone, so do have two-factor authentication, but also beware of its limitations as well. ICANN is calling for wholesale DNSSEC deployment. ICANN has always been saying this, actually. They've long recognized the importance of DNSSEC and is calling for full deployment of the technology across all domains on the internet. Although this really won't solve all the problems of security on the internet. It'd be nice if it did, but it doesn't. It aims to assure that internet users, of course, reach their desired online destination by preventing man-in-the-middle attacks using DNSSEC. ICANN's appeal comes in the wake of most recent attacks against key parts of the DNS infrastructure, some of which took the form of man-in-the-middle intercepts, which we'll cover later on in the show. PDF viewers and online validation services are vulnerable to digital signature spoofing attacks. Time to dust off that fax machine. Well, maybe. I hope not, because I hate fax machines. Anyway, the researchers developed 3 classes of attacks against PDF signatures. That's the universal signature forgery, where an attacker can disable signature verification by providing invalid content within the signature object or removing references to the signature object, and the document signature will still show as valid. There's an incremental saving attack where the attacker can make an incremental save on the document by redefining the document structure, all without invalidating the signature. And then there's signature wrapping, which the attacker can relocate the originally signed content to a different position in the document and insert new content in the previously allocated position without invalidating the signature. That last one is probably most concerning for me. It means I signed for things I really didn't sign for, which could be bad. Flaws in 4G and 5G allow snooping on calls, pinpointing the device's location. The researchers have discovered a 3-prong attack described in a paper to be presented at the Network and Distributed System Security Symposium, say that 10 times fast, in San Diego. We love you, San Diego, by the way. The first attack, dubbed Torpedo, exploits weaknesses in the standards paging protocol used to notify phones of an incoming call or text message before it arrives. Multiple calls made in a short duration could allow a nearby attacker to pinpoint the device and send fake text messages and mount a denial of service attack. The paper, which is authored by researchers from Purdue University and the University of Iowa, contend that Torpedo, their attack that I previously described, sets the stage for 2 additional exploits, as it's plausible, they say, for an attacker to access a victim's device IMSI, the unique number, of course, identifying the GSM subscriber device, with a brute force attack called IMSI cracking. Also, a third attack is made possible called Piercer, pairs the IMSI with the victim's phone number, allowing user location tracking. All the details can be found in their research papers if you're so inclined to go read them, because research papers are enthralling. Well, some of them are actually pretty interesting. TurboTax is hit with a credential stuffing attack. That's right. All the headlines you're seeing about Intuit's, of course, a financial software company. They make Mint, QuickBooks, TurboTax, and all that kind of stuff. It's really just credential stuffing. There's really not much more to report other than some attackers got some people's tax return information, which, of course, as you know, has your social security number on it usually. The incident was discovered during the system security review. They reported it and are working on fixing. There's really not much for them to fix because it's credential stuffing. So don't use the same password for multiple things. Use a password vault like LastPass or 1Password. And I know they've had vulnerabilities, but you should still use them. The new DNS attacks that are making use of DNSSEC, new DNS attacks which make the use of DNSSEC more critical than ever, of course. Now, the CSA directive lists 3 steps that allow attackers to perform hijacking. Much of this is being performed by Iran against other nation-state and organizations within other nation-states. So first, the attacker obtains credentials of an administrator that can change the DNS records. Maybe they're using credential stuffing. This is done using techniques described in the article, including phishing and social engineering. Could also be used as well. The attacker changes the DNS records, including the address, mail exchanger, and name server records, replacing them with the addresses controlled by the attacker. This really isn't that sophisticated of an attack, people. I break into someone's system that they're using to store their DNS records, and I change the IP address to a machine that I control. It's like the most unsophisticated man-in-the-middle attack in existence. Then, of course, because the attacker has set the DNS record to their IP address, they can obtain validated certificates so the user doesn't know that they're not visiting the actual website. And that's the real danger, I think, in this attack, is that you're going to a website, the certificate checks out, everything looks good, but it's not one that's controlled by the organization you think it's really controlled by an attacker. So with that, we will take a short break and come back with expert commentary from our friends at Acunetics. Stay tuned.
Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
If you're interested in quality over quantity and having meaningful conversations rather than just a badge scan, join us. That's right, Security Weekly will be there in collaboration with InfoSec World for InfoSec World 2019 at Disney's Contemporary Resort. You can get discounts and stuff from them. OS 19-Sec Week, get you 15% off. We also have available securityweekly.com/conference request. You can go there and request a briefing with us or a paid sponsored interview that will air on Enterprise Security Weekly. Now I'd like to welcome Nicholas Shibaris, the Chief Technology Officer from Acunetics, to talk about an attack that happened against a social media network being run out of Russia. Nicholas, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for inviting me to the show.
Yes.
So
great to have you, Nicholas. And I'm really interested in the story because I did not see this story until you had pointed it out to me, which is great because I try and monitor all the news, but I was very interested in this one. It sounds like that the attackers found a bug, they reported it, nothing was done, so they unleashed a worm, which if you ask Sammy Kamkar, at least in the US, that's a violation of the CFAA. It can get you in a lot of trouble. So, Nicholas, please give us the details.
Maybe it works differently in Russia.
Maybe.
So yeah, my story centers around vContact, VK for short. And VK is Russia's largest security social network. It's based in St. Petersburg, and it has over 500 million users. So that's nearly the equivalent of maybe our Facebook.
Sure.
It's owned by Mail.ru, the Russia's internet giant. So it's quite a big organization. It's quite a big company. So VK have been running since 2015 a program on HackerOne, a bug bounty program on HackerOne. It's a self-managed program, which means that VK manage the program themselves, and they triage the bugs that are filed on the bounty, and they communicate with the researchers themselves. So they manage the program all on their own. And since 2015, they have paid $250,000 in bug bounty. So one might say that it's been quite successful.
Sure.
Except for this one, maybe. So what happened is about a year ago, a security researcher reported a vulnerability. And according to the researcher, the vulnerability was ignored, right? So the details are not clear, but I'm assuming that maybe they did not triage the vulnerability in time. In any case, no bounty was paid for over a year, and the vulnerability was there for over 1 year. Now, this security researcher works for a group, with a group called Bagoshi, which it develops apps that run on vContact, right? So they're specialists in the social network, and they know how apps work and how they interact with the system. right? So the security researcher managed to get to this group and work with them to exploit the vulnerability that he had discovered a year back. And it happens that on Valentine's Day, they released a worm, which they say they managed to create in a few hours of work. And the worm was innocuous. It did not have any malicious intent. But what happened is that they created a script on vContact, and the script contained they created a post on vContact, and the post contained a script, right? So whoever was reading their post would execute the script in their browser, and the script was actually posting the same post. So it was reposting the same post in all the groups and pages that the victim managed. And this created the worm.
Right. It's actually very similar to what Sammy Kamkar created for the MySpace worm.
Exactly.
When he did that, Sammy is my hero, right? When you visited someone's page, you would get infected with the script. The script would then replicate it out to all the people that you followed in a similar kind of manner. Yeah.
That's right. Yes, that's right. So Bakoshi went a bit went further with this. So they employed various obfuscation techniques to bypass VK's anti-spam filter. So they changed the subject often, and they also had like comments which came directly from random reviews on Google Play, on apps on Google Play. So this worm, or this attack, if you can call it an attack, was discovered immediately by vContact. So when things get bad, they can get moving quite fast.
Right.
So they started deleting the posts, and within 20 minutes of discovery, it was the worm was all contained, right? But in those 20 minutes, Bakoshi said that their post got over 100,000 views.
Wow!
So it also illustrates how far-reaching these attacks can be, and also how important it is to fix these type of vulnerabilities.
Yeah, Sammy had the same experience with MySpace, and back then, we're talking well over 10 years ago.
Yes,
MySpace was a pretty big website. And it's similar to like what Facebook is today, right? There was a big, competition back then. And his worm took down MySpace with like less than 24 hours. MySpace was down. And that's one of the reasons why, obviously, he garnered attention from law enforcement. It sounds like social media worms can still spread just as fast.
Yes, they can still spread just as fast. And in this case, Bakoshi, they took some extra precautions, because their intention was not to take down the social network, but more to expose this vulnerability and get them to fix it, right? So that resulted in their account being temporarily disabled. And then VK sort of saw the bright side of the whole situation and re-enabled their account after a few days. They obviously fixed the bug immediately in this case. It's some things to take away from this is that if you want to run a bug bounty, it's important that you make sure that you have the manpower to run it. It
the right people.
A lot of effort. Yeah. At the end of the day, security researchers are going to be putting their time and effort, and maybe they enjoy doing it. But at the end of the day, if they find something, it's rewarding just for them to say, okay, this is a real bug. I got kudos for it, and maybe I got some money out of it. Maybe not, but I think they appreciate the thank you note.
Right, or a T-shirt or something, right?
Yeah.
So some token of appreciation. What I find interesting, Nicholas, is that these were a company or a group of people that were developing apps for this platform. I like to speculate here in the shows, right? So I'm going to speculate and say that they probably didn't like intentionally say, wake up and go into work Monday morning, go, we're going to look for vulnerabilities in this platform. They probably discovered it as they were developing and deploying apps in the platform and said, ooh, this could be a vulnerability. And I just find that fascinating because if I'm the company, VK in this case, I'm probably going to be a little more receptive to it because I'm like, oh, it wasn't like someone actually looking for it. This is one of our companies that's developing apps, making our platform better and more extensible and usable, and they happen to come across a bug. I think what happens sometimes is if I come along as Paul Asadorian and I say I'm a security researcher and I specifically set out to go find bugs in your platform, right? They might be like, I mean, they do run a bug bounty program, but they might be like, I don't know if it's really a bug. Like, why are you picking on us? Sometimes is the attitude. But in this case, it came from a developer of the app that knows the platform very well, as you stated. I'm just floored that VK wasn't like, oh yeah, I think we should probably just fix that, right? And it doesn't sound like it took them that long to fix it either.
Exactly. Well, you know, when in their defense, when you are running a bug bounty, they get a lot of reports which are invalid.
It's true.
So
Yes,
there's a good amount of effort. I believe it's
Yeah.
over 80% of the reports are just a nuisance, really. So it takes a lot of filtering
Yep.
to take place. But also one other thing is that these security vulnerabilities they either need to be they need to be tested and they need to be verified and they need to be triaged. And you know, if it's a real security vulnerability, they just cannot be ignored because even if they are identified as part of a bug bounty, maybe a white hacker has identified them as part of a bug bounty and he might just say, okay, they don't want to fix it, and he'll run away. But some other person might find it and he might use it to do bad things.
Exactly.
So,
Especially in this case, it was hanging out there for a year. I would say that the folks that found the bug, the vulnerability, are really patient. I mean, a year is a long, and I understand sometimes these processes. Many of my friends have found numerous vulnerabilities in everywhere from very small companies to the largest companies in the world, and sometimes it takes time. A year, in my assessment, is a pretty long time. I mean, not that it's necessarily uncommon, but that's a long time to have a vulnerability like that hanging out there without fixing it. You can argue both sides, right? I can kind of see the point of the researchers getting frustrated and go, you know what? If we release this, they'll fix it really fast, and for the greater good, we should do that. But on the flip side, you can do damage to the company, to potentially its users if it gets out of control or what have you. So there's two sides to this disclosure debate that it seems like we'll always be debating this, Nicholas.
Yes, but what might also happen is that it will get into a list of things to do, and most of these things to do would be like features which will make the system look better or more interesting. Right. And I don't think that's the right approach to do that. Security vulnerabilities should have the highest priority, and they should be fixed as fast as possible and especially when it's something this serious.
Yeah, and I can see, you might buy yourself some time with some kind of extra filtering or bypasses just to, before you go in and like rewrite a bunch of code, you might put in a temporary fix. And, researchers are willing to kind of, work with that because typically your temporary fix can be bypassed in some way, right? It's just like a temporary stopgap measure. And researchers are typically patient if the company is really showing effort that they're trying to fix it. It's when they just ignore researchers that we end up with situations like this. And as Dan Kaminsky says, it's not really in the interest of user safety to have, people releasing exploits into social media platforms in this case, right?
Yes, especially if they are the developers and they're earning money out of that, so they don't really want them to run out of business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a benefit to keeping the internet running, to keeping sites running, because both legitimate and not legitimate actors are benefiting monetarily from that.
Exactly. Finally, I would like to conclude with like the ethical question: should researchers exploit the vulnerabilities identified in such systems, even if maybe the owner or the company is not willing, or maybe does not have the time or the resources to, or the will to fix these vulnerabilities? Should they go ahead and exploit these vulnerabilities? And in my mind, that's a big no. But it's in this case it turned out well because the vulnerability was fixed in no time and minimal damage was done. But still, it's a big ethical question.
It is for sure. And as a security researcher, you've got options, right? You can keep it to yourself. And I think the problem with that is you don't sleep good at night knowing that someone else could find this vulnerability and be doing bad things with it, and you knew about it, right? You can, like you said, release the exploit and execute it, which could have, I don't know the international laws, but in the U.S., typically that is a violation of the law, and you will likely be prosecuted depending on, of course, the circumstances. But you can also, I think, a third option that a lot of people do is they release the exploit out into the wild, right? They just make a blog post. Here it is. I'm publishing it. I'm not executing the exploit against anyone, but I'm releasing all of my research so that defenders know about this, can put in, the defensive measures. Attackers also know about it, which is a double-edged sword, but at least it's all out there. And those are, really tough decisions.
Yeah, and sometimes there's like a cool down period or like where they leave it for 3 months and then they publish their work after 3 months. So that seems to be like the industry way of doing things. Yeah. Agreed.
Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for appearing on Hack Naked News. I want to encourage our listeners to visit securityweekly.com/Acunetics, ACUNETIX. You can find out all kinds of fun stuff about Acunetics. They make a really, really awesome web application vulnerability scanner. You can get a free 14-day trial and learn more about it at securityweekly.com/Acunetics. Nicholas, thank you so much for appearing on Hack Naked News.
Thanks once again, Paul. Thanks again.
And with that will conclude this episode of Hack Naked News. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.